You did not click on this story by accident. At some point, you've totally trusted someone, right? Only to find out that the ground was never really solid, because this is not just a story about cheating. It is a story about how love, lies, obsession, and consequences collide in ways no one ever expects. And once it starts, there is no going back. It began at a time when everything felt right. To right, the kind of happiness that feels earned, calm, and real. I was 28, working a steady job downtown. Nothing flashy, but enough to live comfortably. I paid my bills, went to the gym, spent weekends with friends. Life was simple, predictable, safe. Then I met Sarah. She was 26, magnetic in a way that is hard to describe without sounding dramatic. Bright eyes, an easy laugh. The kind of presence that pulls people in without effort. We met at my friend Alex's housewarming party. I remember thinking I would talk to her for a few minutes and move on. Instead, we talked the entire night. I broke my own rule and texted her. The next day, our first date was at a small Italian place downtown. Candlelight, soft music, nothing extravagant. She talked about hiking, being outdoors, escaping the noise of the city. I was more of a gym and routine kind of guy, but the way she spoke made even muddy trails sound meaningful. Things moved fast, faster than they should have. We fell hard, or, at least, I did. I introduced her to my friends. My mother approved, which almost never happens. My best friend Ryan laughed and said it was about time I found someone real. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. About 6 weeks in, she invited me to a work happy hour. That is where I met Jake. Tall, polished, confident, the kind of man who smiles dehiscently and speaks like he is always performing. I did not like him instantly. There was something about the way he looked at Sarah. Too familiar, too comfortable. They shared inside jokes. Finished each other's sentences. She brushed it off. Said they worked closely together, big projects. Long hours, practically inseparable at work. I ignored the warning in my chest. 3 months into dating, we decided to move in together. I know how that sounds now. My friends warned me. Ryan gave me the slowdown speech, but her lease was ending. My apartment was bigger. We were together every night anyway. On paper, it made sense. The first weeks were perfect. Cooking dinner, watching shows. She dragged me to yoga. I hated every minute of it. But I went because she smiled when I complained. Then the late nights started. Vague excuses. Project deadlines. Emergency meetings. Jake's name came up constantly. Jake needed help. Jake was stressed. Jake and I are swamped. She came home wired, but exhausted, smelling faintly of a cologne that was not mine. Then came the proposal. Yes, I know. Too fast. That's just way too reckless. But we were standing at a scenic overlook, sunset burning the sky orange and purple. I was convinced she was the one. I pulled out a ring that cost more than I should have spent. She cried. She said yes. We were engaged. For a bit, everything felt calm again. Not great, but steady. I blamed the tension on wedding planning, stress, and her demanding job. I wanted to believe that. Then I planned a surprise getaway. A small cabin by a lake 2 hours north. I coordinated with her friend Amy to make sure Sarah was free. I wanted to reconnect, to breathe. The morning we were supposed to leave, she got a text. Work, emergency. She looked flustered, apologetic. Said she had to go into the office immediately. Rain check. I was disappointed, but I swallowed it. Later that day, pure chance, I logged into our shared phone account to pay the bill. Call logs, text times, multiple calls with Jake that morning, right before her emergency message. When she got home, I asked casually how work went. She stumbled. Mentioned servers, databases, crisis management. She worked in marketing. My stomach twisted. That was when the paranoia started. Her phone never left her hand. face down on the table. Password changed. New lingerie appeared in the drawer. Expensive lacy. Not for me. One night at dinner, I asked the question I had been avoiding. Was there something going on between her and Jake? The reaction was explosive. She accused me of being insecure, controlling, paranoid. Turned the entire conversation around until I was apologizing for asking. We slept in separate rooms that night. The apartment felt poisoned after that. Then she announced a girls' weekend camping trip, North Woods. Spotty service. She warned me not to worry if I did not hear from her. The next morning, I got a text from Amy, asking if Sarah wanted to meet for coffee. Amy was not on any trip. We had location sharing turned on for emergencies. I opened the app with shaking hands. Her location was active, deep in the woods, at a private cabin labeled March Lake Retreat. Jake's last name was March. I felt physically sick. I decided to wait, let her return, and explain. I needed proof. I needed clarity. That night, severe storms rolled through the exact area she was in. Thunder warnings. Lightning alerts. I texted her to stay safe. No reply. Then my phone rang. A nurse from North Regional Hospital. Sarah had been struck by lightning. She was stable, burned, injured. Her emergency contact fiancé, and the man with her, Jacob March. If this story is already making your chest feel tight, stay with me. Because what happened next was not just betrayal. It was the beginning of something far darker. If you want the full truth, keep listening. And if stories like this resonate with you, support the channel and stay until the end. This is only the beginning. The drive to the hospital felt unreal. Like my body was moving while my mind stayed frozen somewhere miles behind. 2 hours on the road, headlights cutting through darkness, hands locked on the steering wheel so tight my fingers went numb. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every ignored sign, every excuse I had accepted because it was easier than facing the truth. By the time I arrived, it was close to midnight. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear, that quiet hum of machines and low voices that only exists in places where people wait for life-changing news. A nurse checked my name, then looked at me with that professional sympathy that already told me too much. They led me to Sarah's room. She was awake. Bandages wrapped around her arm and shoulder, creeping up her neck. Her skin looked pale, almost gray, and the confident woman I thought I knew was gone. When she saw me, her face collapsed. Tears came instantly, heavy and uncontrollable. She started talking before I could say a word. She confessed everything. The affair had started almost 2 months earlier. Late nights turned into drinks. Drinks turned into secrets. Jake's place, hotels. Lies stacked on top of lies. The cabin was supposed to be their escape, their special weekend away from reality. She kept saying she was confused, that it started as something physical, that feelings complicated things, that she planned to tell me after the trip. I stood there listening, but it felt like I was watching someone else's life. Then she talked about the lightning. They had been hiking despite the storm warnings, chasing a scenic view, too caught up in themselves to care about the sky darkening above them. Open clearing, metal hiking poles. Thunder rolling closer. The strike came without warning. She remembered being thrown backward, hitting the ground, burning pain. Jake, screaming. Then nothing. She cried about karma, about the universe stopping them, about destiny punishing her. She said the lightning was a sign. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not anger, not rage. Emptiness. I realized I did not recognize this person anymore. The woman talking about cosmic signs and destiny was not my fiancée. She was a stranger who had already destroyed everything before nature stepped in. I told her I needed air. I sat alone in the hospital cafeteria for over an hour, staring at a cup of burnt coffee, asking myself what came next. I thought about my life before her, my routines, my peace, and how quickly it had been replaced by chaos. When I went back to her room, she looked hopeful. That hope died quickly. I told her it was over, that when she was discharged, her belongings would be packed and sent wherever she chose to stay, that I was done. She begged, cried, promised change, said the lightning changed her. That it showed her what really mattered. I told her it showed me what mattered too. And it was not this. I went home and packed her things, piece by piece. Photos, clothes, gifts. Every object felt heavier than it should have. I blocked her number, deleted her from everything. Clean break. A few days later, her mother called, begging me not to abandon her daughter after everything she had been through. I told her, calmly, that Sarah's injuries did not erase her choices. I wished her a full recovery, but I was done. The calls did not stop. Blocked numbers, emails, messages filled with apologies that slowly turned into blame. Then came the hospital bill. Thousands of dollars forwarded to my address. Sarah emailed me, asking for help, saying we were still engaged when it happened, saying I owed her. Then she blamed me, said my distance pushed her to Jake. That was when I understood something important. Some people do not just lie, they rewrite reality to avoid facing themselves. I told her not to contact me again. That should have been the end. It was not, because when obsession replaces love, people do not let go quietly. If you think the story ends here, stay with me. What came next was not just disturbing, it was dangerous. And if this story is hitting something deep, support the channel and keep listening. The worst was still ahead. Things were quiet for a short while after that, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the air is holding its breath before something breaks. I tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. I started therapy. I went back to the gym. I told myself I was moving on. My therapist helped me understand something important. The hospital confrontation, the constant messages, the way Sarah twisted reality to make herself the victim. It was all about control. Losing me meant losing the story she had built in her head. And when that story collapsed, she panicked. He also mentioned something that stuck with me. Trauma does not create new personalities. It amplifies what is already there. Looking back, that explained a lot. I met Allison about a month later through a mutual friend. She was calm, grounded, no drama, no chaos. Being around her felt like breathing normally again after being underwater too long. We took things slow. I kept my past vague. I did not want it poisoning something that felt healthy. For a moment, I believed the storm had finally passed. Then Cerez's father called. I recognized his voice immediately. Slurred, angry, loud. He accused me of destroying his daughter. Said she cried every night. Said I owed her because I promised to marry her. I told him calmly that Sarah cheated, that her mental state was not my responsibility, and that she needed professional help. He did not want logic. He wanted someone to blame. A week later, late at night, I was driving home from Allison's place. The street was quiet. Suburban? Familiar? Then headlights appeared behind me. Too close. Aggressive. Tailgating. Primera slowed down, expecting them to pass. They did not. The vehicle swerved alongside me, forcing me toward the curb. An old pickup truck cut in front of me and slammed the brakes. I barely stopped in time. I recognized the truck instantly. Sarah's father, a hump without face red, eyes wild, staggering slightly. He pounded on my window, screaming, demanding I get out, accusing me of ruining his family, telling me to take Sarah back and fix what I broke. I locked the doors and grabbed my phone. When I told him I was calling the police, his expression changed. He reached into his truck and pulled out a gun. Everything slowed down. The barrel tapped against my window as he leaned close, telling me I was going to call Sarah, tell her I made a mistake, and take her back. I told the emergency dispatcher what was happening, my voice shaking. Then the gun went off. The sound inside the car was deafening. Glass exploded. Pain tore through my leg like fire. I screamed and collapsed sideways, blood soaking through my jeans. He froze. Panic replaced rage. He stared at what he had done, then ran back to his truck and sped off. Sirens arrived quickly. Paramedics, police. Questions, lights. The bullet had passed clean through my calf, missing bone and major arteries by pure luck. The police found him hours later. Drunk. Gun hidden. Evidence everywhere. This was no longer drama. This was attempted murder. He was arrested, charged. Bail denied. And suddenly, Sarah's obsession had crossed a line that could not be walked back. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong, because obsession does not stop when consequences begin. It escalates. If you're still here, keep listening. What happened next proved that sometimes the real danger is not the betrayal. It's the refusal to let go. Recovery was slow. Physically, my leg healed faster than my head. The doctors said I was lucky. The bullet missed everything important. I nodded and thanked them. But luck was not the word I would have chosen. Lucky people do not end up bleeding in their cars because of someone else's delusions. Physical therapy became routine. Pain, stretching, relearning trust in my own body. Therapy sessions became deeper, darker. Nightmares started. The sound of the gunshot replayed in my sleep. The look in his eyes, the realization that someone truly meant to end my life. Allison stayed through it all. She came to appointments when I asked, sat with me during bad nights. Never pushed, never demanded explanations I was not ready to give. But trauma has weight, and even when someone carries it with you, it still presses down on everything. I could feel it affecting us. I became hypervigilant, jumping at sounds, checking locks twice, watching cars in my mirrors. Allison noticed. She tried to be patient, but fear is contagious. You do not need to say it out loud for it to spread. Then things went quiet. Sarah's father was in jail awaiting trial. Sarah was supposedly staying with her mother. The police issued a temporary restraining order. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. That silence felt wrong. One evening, Allison was over at my apartment. We were trying to have a normal night, a movie playing in the background. My leg propped up on pillows, the lights low, just pretending life was normal. Then we heard pounding on the door, not knocking, pounding, desperate, erratic, violent. I checked the peephole. Sarah. She looked unrecognizable, hair messy, eyes darting, lips moving as if she were arguing with someone who was not there. I told her to leave. Told her I would call the police. She screamed that we were connected, that the lightning tied us together, that her father tried to help us, that destiny demanded we be together. Allison whispered that she was scared. So was I. I called emergency services. The pounding stopped. Silence. Then glass shattered somewhere on the side of the building. Sarah was trying to get in. She began screaming my name from the front yard, pacing, ranting, yelling about signs and fate and betrayal. Neighbors' lights flicked on. Curtains moved. People watched, but did nothing. Allison went to check the window. That was the mistake. Sarah saw her. The moment her eyes locked onto Allison, something inside her snapped. The rage on her face was not jealousy. It was possession. She charged the door again. In the Charles, Allison cracked the door open for a split second, trying to see where Sarah had gone. Sarah lunged. She grabbed Allison by the hair and dragged her outside onto the lawn, screaming that Allison was stealing what belonged to her. I do not remember the pain in my leg when I moved. I remember the sound Allison made when she hit the ground. I tackled Sarah. We crashed into the grass. She fought like someone who had nothing left to lose, scratching, biting, screaming about lightning and destiny and how none of this was supposed to happen. Neighbors shouted. Sirens wailed closer. Police pulled her off me moments later. Allison was shaking, crying, clumps of hair in her hands. I was bleeding again, my leg screaming in protest. This time, there was no question. Sarah was taken away in restraints. Not to jail, to a psychiatric facility. As the ambulance doors closed, she screamed my name over and over, swearing this was not over. And in that moment, standing under flashing lights, neighbors watching, Allison shaking beside me, I realized something terrifying. The affair was never the worst part. The worst part was that I had loved someone who never saw me as a person, only as something she owned. The aftermath was quieter, but heavier. Sarah was placed under an involuntary psychiatric hold. The doctors called it acute psychosis triggered by trauma, compounded by pre-existing issues no one had properly addressed. The lightning strike, they said, likely intensified something that had already been unstable. Delusions of destiny. Obsession? Paranoia. None of that erased what she had done. Her father remained in jail, facing charges that would likely put him away for years. His actions were no longer explained away as anger or alcohol. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I was left standing in the wreckage. Allison stayed with me that night. We barely slept. Every sound made us tense. When morning came, she sat at the edge of the bed and told me the truth with tears in her eyes. She cared about me deeply, but she could not live inside this storm. She needed safety, normalcy, a life not shadowed by police reports, restraining orders, and unpredictable danger. She said it gently, honestly, without blame. I did not argue, because love is not asking someone to sacrifice their peace for your survival. We hugged for a long time before she left. No anger, no drama, just grief and understanding. After she walked out, the apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. I focused on recovery. Physical therapy became routine again. I forced myself back into work. Colleagues knew pieces of the story, enough to be careful around me, but not enough to pry. I appreciated that. Therapy sessions went deeper. We talked about boundaries, about warning signs I ignored, about why I confused intensity with intimacy, why I rushed commitment because it felt like certainty. I learned something painful. Chaos can feel like passion if you do not know what calm love looks like. Months passed. Sarah was eventually transferred to a long-term treatment program under court supervision. A permanent restraining order was issued. Any violation would mean immediate incarceration. I never saw her again. Occasionally, I would hear updates through legal channels. She was improving. Then, she was not. Progress came in waves, not straight lines. Her story was no longer mine to manage. My leg healed, the scar remained. A reminder, not of the pain, but of the lesson. I moved apartments. Somewhere quieter. Installed better security. Changed my number. Clean slate. Slowly, the hypervigilance faded. I stopped jumping at every sound. I slept through the night again. The nightmares softened, then stopped. One evening, sitting alone on my balcony, I realized something. I was not angry anymore. Not at Sarah, not at her father, not even at myself. Anger had burned itself out, leaving clarity behind. I saw the full arc now. The red flags I ignored because I wanted the fantasy. The lies I accepted because confrontation felt harder. The warning signs my gut screamed while my heart begged for denial. The lightning did not punish her. It revealed everything. It stripped away the story I wanted to believe and forced the truth into the open before I built a life on it. I used to think betrayal was the worst thing that could happen to a relationship. Primera ahua is wrong. The worst thing is staying when your safety, dignity, and sanity are slowly being Now, when people ask me if I regret how fast everything moved, I tell them this: I do not regret loving. I regret ignoring myself. If this story reached you, if any part of it made your chest tighten or your instincts flare, do not ignore that feeling. Stay with this channel. Support Italiano. These stories are not just entertainment. They are warnings, mirrors, and sometimes lifelines. And if you want to keep exploring stories where truth eventually surfaces, where illusions collapse, and where survival turns into strength, there is another video waiting for you. because sometimes the most dangerous storms are not the ones in the sky. They are the ones we invite into our lives and call love.